Jimmie Johnson is one of the all-time greats in NASCAR. In a Cup Series career that began in 2001, Johnson won the series championship 7 times, which ties him for the most with Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt Sr., and 83 races, at least one each year from 2002 to 2017. Amongst Johnson's wins were the Daytona 500 twice, the Brickyard 400 4 times, the Southern 500 twice, and the World 600 4 times. Prior to the 2020 Cup Series season, it was announced that Johnson would be retiring from NASCAR at the end of it. In 2021 and 2022, Johnson primarily competed in the IndyCar series. There, he would admittedly struggle for the most part. Out of 29 races between the two seasons, Johnson only finished in the top 10 twice, each in 2022, a 6th place at Texas and a 5th at Iowa, and his best finish on a road course or street circuit was a pair of 16th place finishes in 2022 at Mid-Ohio and Laguna Seca. 2023 would be a significant year for Johnson, as he was voted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and he would also return to NASCAR. Johnson bought into Petty GMS Motorsports, and it became known as Legacy Motor Club. In 2022, the team had a respectable year, highlighted by Eric Jones winning the Southern 500. Johnson would drive for the team part-time. Due to Johnson's entry not having a charter, he was not guaranteed a starting position for any race that had more than 40 entries, which would be the case at Daytona with 42 entries. Johnson would lock himself into the field by being the fastest of the 6 drivers not guaranteed a starting position. If another open driver finished ahead of Johnson in their qualifying race, Johnson's qualifying speed was quick enough to at least give him one of the 2 final positions for the 500. Reserved for the 2 quickest non-chartered entries that were not the highest finishing in their category in their respective qualifying race. Johnson's first NASCAR race since November 2020 would be the first Daytona qualifying race, where he started 12th out of 21 drivers. Early in the event, Johnson ran in the top 10. On lap 23, Johnson made his only pit stop as part of a group of fellow Chevrolet drivers who would form their own draft once they returned to the race. However, Johnson's pack was unable to catch the pack that the leaders were in, even after they made their pit stop. Ultimately, Johnson finished in 14th place and would start in 39th place for his 20th Daytona 500, due to Zane Smith being the highest finishing of the drivers in open entries in the race. By lap 25 of the 500, Johnson had moved up to 28th place. 15 laps later, he made his first pit stop and was in 5th by that point, although several drivers ahead of him pitted earlier. Once Johnson rejoined, he was running in around 25th place, but would move up as the first stage got closer to ending. As lap 64 started, Johnson led the outside lane, but he and his group were struggling and started to drop back. However, on the back straightaway, Johnson got behind Eric Almirola and was back into the top 10. He would finish in 7th place for the stage and was the highest running Chevrolet at that point. Unfortunately, after making his second pit stop, Johnson's position dropped to being in the teens. Stage 2 started on lap 72 and Johnson re-entered the top 10 by lap 93. Around the halfway point of the 200-lap race, Johnson and teammate Jones were drafting, with Jones running 5th. Johnson would be in 6th place as the halfway point was completed. On lap 108, Johnson pitted as the second driver in the group, but was 9th in the pack when he re-entered the track itself. 10 laps later, Johnson slowed down enough to avoid a multi-car crash in turn 4, after making another pit stop and getting a pit lane speeding penalty, causing him to go to the rear of the field. Johnson ended up 28th in the second stage. However, once again, Johnson got back towards the front and was running in around 7th place with 50 laps remaining. After falling back from the leaders, Johnson made his final pit stop with 22 laps remaining. 3 laps later, a multi-car crash brought out the caution and bunched the field back up. In the crash, Ryan Preece lost control and made contact with Johnson, although the damage to Johnson was minimal, at worst. Following the restart with 13 laps remaining, Johnson was in 15th place. As lap 190 was about to start, Johnson used the momentum of his lane to get into 8th place, but lost contact with the leaders in the last 10 laps. On lap 199, Daniel Suarez spun out and the caution came out, meaning the 500 would go into overtime. During that period, Johnson was collected in a crash, and the damage was enough for him to retire from the race. He would be credited with a 31st place finish with 203 of the race's 212 laps completed. Johnson's second Cup Series race of the season would be Austin, the 6th race of the year. After starting 31st, Johnson's car received damage on the first lap when Brad Keselowski spun and, in reaction, Chris Buescher and Ty Dillon made contact, causing Dillon to lose control and run into Johnson. Unfortunately, the damage on Johnson's car was bad enough that he retired from the race and ended up in 38th place. At Charlotte, Johnson returned to compete at the World 600. After starting 37th out of 37 drivers, Johnson was in 25th place by lap 68. 7 laps later, Johnson spun in turn 2 and lightly hit the wall. As the first stage ended, Johnson went to the garage area with steering issues. He eventually returned to the race, but lost control on lap 164 and got into teammate Noah Gragson. At this point, Johnson's race ended with a last place finish. Johnson intended to do the Cup Series first race at the Chicago Street Circuit. However, following a murder-suicide in his family, Johnson decided to withdraw from the event. He did not participate in any other NASCAR races in 2023, but he confirmed that he would return in 2024. 2023 was Jimmie Johnson's return season to NASCAR. While the final results were not particularly good, Johnson did show his old competitiveness. Hopefully, 2024 will be a better season for him.